February 6th meeting of the Committee for Audit and Finance to order. First, number 2 on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. I'm assuming everybody has gotten a copy of the agenda. Can I please have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
It's done. Mr. Kennedy, we don't have to vote. It's done. We just move on. Oh, I apologize. Can I have a vote on the motion to adopt the agenda, please?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Done. Next, I'm assuming you all had a copy of the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the January 10th, 2023 meeting?
So moved, Keith. This is Ed.
Second.
Can I have a vote as to approval of the minutes of the January 10th, 2023 meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. On to item 4, the spring 2023 bond application notes bans. Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Grabowski. Good afternoon to the chair and committee. So what this item is the district's spring 2023 ban or bond anticipation note issuance. And so because of the complexities related to how the district packages and services debt, we'll have a brief foundational presentation by our bond counsel, Ms. Carol Clark, as well as our financial consultants, PFM, and then we'll move into the resolution that we're asking the board to consider for adoption. Ms. Clark.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. And I'd like to add that Jay Glover from PFM is on by Zoom, and we have worked through this presentation together. And so Jay will be piping in from time to time. The idea here is, as Ms. Williams said, we're really here to consider the bond anticipation note, but that is one of 3 financings that the school district does each year. And so really to understand why we do what we do with the ban, we need to sort of put it in the bigger picture, to put it in context of all 3 of these financings and how they sort of fit together. This was included in the agenda packages.
Hey, Carol, this is Jay. If I might interrupt, is it helpful if I share my screen? Could people see the presentation as well?
Yes.
Yeah, would be helpful. Thank you.
I'll see if I can. I think I can do this.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay. As we say here, this is the sort of the debt overview, and we'll touch on the general categories of financings and then go into a little bit more depth in as we go through the program. And these are, just to give you an idea, this is a subject that you will see throughout the year, and it's a lot to take in one go, but hopefully this will help give you a familiarity with it. There are 2 types of debt that the district uses annually. There's short-term debt, which is basically to fund cash flow needs. And we take care of the tax anticipation note, which we'll talk about, which covers cash flow funding in the general fund. And the bond anticipation note that we're talking about here is aimed at capital needs. Then we've got long-term debt, which is for more major projects. And then finally, we'll touch on the sales tax program, which the school district has just started in on the 3rd phase of the sales tax. And that is not really debt. It is more pay as you go with some cash flow funding from the bond anticipation note. If you want to flip over, Jay, I think if you can go on over to page number 3. Okay. The short-term debt, as we said, is a means of managing cash flow. The tax anticipation note is usually issued in the late summer or early fall, and that is all a consequence of the way that the property taxes come in. As you know, you get your property tax bills typically in October of each year, and most taxes are paid in December and then through the middle of January, which is the due date. And so because of that, a kind of a shortfall usually occurs in the general fund over the summer, possibly into early fall. And so when we issue the tax anticipation note, that is just doing a borrowing that is paid back from your operating fund, taxes collected for the general fund. And it's issued each fall and is paid off on April 1st of each year. Secondly, we've got the bond anticipation note, which is what we're here to talk about today, that covers a number of different capital needs. It pays fixed cost of ownership, also technology upgrades and capital maintenance, and then it provides cash flow funding for the sales tax program that we'll go into in a little bit more depth, as well as making debt service payments on the installment purchase financings. And those were a series of financings that were done in 2004, 5, and 6 that the school district is still paying the debt off of that. I think all of that will be retired by 2030, but it was the means of financing the 2004 to 2009 program. And then flipping over to page 4, when we talk about long-term debt, there are two types of debt that the school districts are authorized by state law to issue. There is what's called 8% debt. And what that means is under state law, each school district in the state can issue general obligation bonds, that's bonds paid from property taxes, up to 8% of its assessed value. And in order to issue that 8% debt, the board has to approve it, but no further authorization has to take place. But once you hit your 8% debt limit capacity, then general obligation bonds can only be issued if you hold a referendum. And the last referendum that the district held, I think, was in 1999. And that approved a series of bonds that have been refinanced, and those are being retired as this year and over the next couple of years. So that referendum debt has just about been paid off. Then secondly, as I mentioned, there are installment purchase revenue bonds. And sometimes this is referred to as alternate financing. And this is a complicated type of financing that was authorized by state law in the mid-2000s, but then in 2006, the legislature closed this down, so it's no longer an option for issuing debt. But basically, the way that that works is the bonds are not issued, the long-term bonds are not issued by the school district, but by a nonprofit corporation. And over the years, you'll hear references to CEF, C-E-E-F-C, which is the abbreviation for Charleston Education Excellence Financing Corporation. And that corporation is a nonprofit that was created for means of issuing these bonds. And by virtue of the fact that the bonds are issued by a corporation instead of the school district, that means they do not count against the school district's 8% debt limit. And so we'll see further over here in the numbers, but somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think it was around $700 million of bonds were issued over a 3-year period that provided rebuilding and substantial renovation of a large number of schools from 2004. Really, I guess those projects were finished around 2010. And while the long-term bonds don't count against the school district's 8% debt limit, what the district does each year is do 2 short-term financings to make the payments that are due on those bonds. So the CEF bonds, or the alternative financing bonds, are issued with interest due to the bondholders on May 1st and December 1st of June 1 and December 1 of each year, and principal due on December 1. And so for CEF, which is a nonprofit, their only purpose is to assist the school district in financings. When they need to make the payments to the bondholders, the school district issues the ban in the spring to make the June 1 interest payment, and then they issue a short-term bond issue in November of each year to make the December 1 principal and interest payments. And those two issues of the school district do count against the debt limit, but they are all retired in roughly 6 months' time, 4 to 6 months. So we use up a little bit of debt limit and then it's retired and that amount of debt limit is freed up. Going on to page 5, and please feel free to stop me if anybody has any questions as we go through this. And I know you probably have a number of questions later. So
I think for the public and definitely for all the new board members, when you go back into this, the legislation set this 8% limit. And as I understand it, we're still 50% underneath it or somewhere down in that range.
right.
But that 8% was set back in 2000.
Oh, no, it was
even further back.
much earlier than that. Home rule, which applies to counties and special purpose districts and cities, but not the school districts, that was codified in 1978. And then the portion of that applied to school districts was in 1982. And so that 8% was set there, but then previously there had been limits. There've always been limits that's always been based on assessed value. But when you look back in legislation from the 1950s, when basically each school district in the state, and at that time, practically each high school was its own school district. I mean, you would have multiple school districts within counties and within areas of counties. And they were all created by special legislation, and they had varying debt limits. And so it was very random.
The reason I bring it up is that when you look at the 8% assessed value, and everybody thinks about Kiowa, Hilton Head, Isle of Palm, and everything,
Right.
all the property value in here. Then when you look at what we actually get our revenue, we're not getting the revenue applied to that 8% from the property value. It's coming from business property, correct me if I'm wrong, cars,
Right. Well, the
planes, personal property, but it's not coming from the actual house assessed value.
No, the 8% is when it comes, there are two types of debt. And
Well, I'm
the
talking
legal
about revenue. I'm not talking about the debt.
I mean,
I understand how we set the value, the limit.
two types of millage. There's debt millage and then there's operating millage.
Right.
Do you want to?
So just for clarity, for owner occupied
Correct.
residents, no, but for all other properties.
But
yes.
that's what I mean for owner. So, but when you look at that 8%, is it throwing in the owner property value?
Yes.
Right. So really I understand that. But the point is, as we go forward and we consider and we talk about, well, we're well underneath it. When that was set up, when those limits were set up, they were set up specifically with the understanding that a lot of revenue would be coming from the assessed value of property houses, of individual homeowners. And we're not doing that anymore.
Well, for purposes of paying the payments on the bonds.
Oh, I understand. I'm
homeowners
just
do
saying
pay.
for when you come forward and say, like today, I know we're just trying to cover our expenses and what we're required for, and I'm all for it. But there's a general perception out there when you say 8%, everybody's thinking like, well, it's 8%. You've got all this wonderful room, increase more bonds, build more schools. But when you really think about that 8% limit, there's no revenue backing up that limit under the initial intention of why that limit was put in. That's all.
So do you mean, when you're talking about the revenue, you mean for purposes of operations?
Correct. Or
Okay.
sales taxes or anything to retire all this
Okay.
debt.
Well,
So if we incur more debt, it's based upon revenue, perceived revenue that we're going to be getting in. And we'll get into this later on when we start talking about, interest rates and everything. And
Right.
I'm just going from your budget that you produce, which I think it's got a wonderful explanation, a lot better than some of the documentation that was produced.
Yes.
So,
I guess for purposes of operating, there's the general fund and there's one millage for that.
right.
And then on the debt side, there's a separate millage. And for purposes of calculating the 8%, everything is taken into consideration.
correct.
Real, personal, airplanes, manufacturing,
Everything.
all of it. And then for purposes for making payments on the bonds, everybody does pay the debt service millage, because what Act 388 did was exempted owner-occupied residential real property from paying the operating
388,
millage,
right.
but not from the debt service millage.
And the only reason I bring this up is that in the report, there's always this talk about how good we're doing because we have so much space underneath this limit. But there's a misunderstanding of why this limit was put in, why it was put in at that rate. And at
Yes.
some point, the more bonds we issue, at some point, we're gonna have to pay them off. So that's the only,
Well,
yeah,
and-
which is
and-
not today's purpose.
And
we need to move on.
The
Yeah, I
resident,
don't
the
want to beat this to
residential
death.
people
Yeah.
do pay off the bonds.
Right.
They don't pay to operate those schools,
Right.
but they are paying to operate the
Right.
bond, I mean, to pay off the bonds.
I'm sorry.
So, okay.
Continue, please.
Then if we head over to page 5, this spells out the issuances that we do each year. And time-wise, I'm skipping down to the short-term debt bullet first, because this is the sequence throughout the calendar year. In April-May timeframe, we issued the bond anticipation notes, as we said, to fund technology, capital maintenance, fixed cost of ownership, and then the June 1 interest payment on the installment bonds. That's all in Series A. And then the Series B bond anticipation note is cash flow funding for the sales tax program. And in the end, and this was something that we really tried to educate the public when we did the first sales tax referendum in 2010, is at the end of the day, there will be no long-term debt to finance the sales tax projects. We do interim funding, but no one will ever pay property taxes for the sales tax programs. That will all get retired from the sales tax. So that's the spring ban. As we mentioned, in late summer, early fall, we do the tax anticipation note, and that's just to put money into the operating fund, the general fund, until the tax collections, the big bulk of those come in December, January. And then finally, the final issue is in October and November, we issue short-term general obligation bonds that pay off the Series A. I think I'm hearing you three. The Series A bond anticipation note, which we're talking about now. And then it also funds that December 1st principal and interest payment on the installment purchase revenue bonds. And then it's been, Jay, jump in, but I'm thinking it has been a good 10 years since we've done any long-term bonds, and that's bonds payable for more than a year. And those last long-term issuances were in the early 2010s, and they were just for refinancings. But the district is expecting to issue or considering issuing about $99 million of long-term debt in fiscal year 2024 to fund some projects that were initially, I think, earmarked as phase 5 sales tax projects that Ms. Williams can probably speak to in more detail when we get to that point. And then the final thing that we're looking out for, especially the financial advisors are keeping their eye out for, is that we do refinancings from time to time when the market conditions are favorable. And this is just like refinancing your mortgage. It's if rates are low enough, then we go out and we always look at the savings to make sure that it makes enough sense. There are enough savings there to make it sensible to issue the refunding debt. And then going over to page 6, and I've sort of touched on this, and Jay can go into a little bit more detail, but this is a snapshot here that shows that first category is the long-term GOs. As you see, we've had 2009, 10, and 12, which were all refinancings. 2019B, that was some of the short-term bonds that we pushed a couple of maturities out a little further. Jay?
Yeah, if I can chime in here, as Carol's talked about some of the sequencing of the financings, this just
Okay.
gets,
And can you jump on to page 6, please? so they
Yeah.
can see.
I think I'm on page 6. Am I not? Having some technical.
No, there you go.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, as Carol mentioned, we do a sequence of financings throughout the year. And again, this is Jay Glover from PFM Financial Advisors. We assist the city or the district as your financial advisor accessing the debt markets. This table just gives kind of the numbers behind what Carol just spoke about, showing your GO bonds at the top of the table, including out to the right, what's subject to your 8% limit, which is about 25.7 million. And then the short-term bands that we're talking about today as well. You'll see these are the bands actually from last year that will be paid off shortly. And that's about, so right now you have about $247 million worth of outstanding bonds. And then you have your installment purchase revenue bonds down at the bottom, which is just shy of about 400 million. So in total, you have about $700 million worth of debt outstanding. But when you subtract out the short-term cash flow element of that, you're around $450 million worth of outstanding debt. And as we kind of compare that to what your overall debt limits are, you can see on this table, as Carol mentioned, this is just a calculation of your outstanding 8% debt limit. So legally, you could issue up to $413 million worth of 8% debt and not be and still meet your capacity. Let me just, and this is getting a bit in the weeds. So PFM as your financial advisor maintains a pretty in-depth model that looks at all the different outstanding financings and works to manage not only your 8% debt capacity, but also what the millage levy is to actually service that debt. As the chairman was mentioning, obviously you can issue up to $400 million worth of debt with an 8% capacity, but you also have to be able to levy the millage to actually make that debt service payment. So not only do we like to leave a cushion within your 8% debt limit, but we also have a target millage levy that we set for debt service each day that we want to stay within. So this here is just a snapshot that shows sort of long-term over the course of the next 10 years, what type of 8% debt is outstanding and what type of capacity remains. So again, we reserve 8% capacity to fund fixed cost of ownership each year via your band of about $55 million. We also reserve capacity for cash flow bands in your sales tax program, which you can see here. Currently, you have about $83 million, and we'll add about $40 million to that via the 2023 band we're discussing today. And then you also have capacity of about $37 million reserved for your installment payments each year. So what that really gives you is you have about $172 million worth of additional 8% capacity available in any given year as you look forward. Carol mentioned that the thought is that we might issue about 99 million of additional 8% debt this year on a long-term basis. So if you take that into account, you still have significant capacity within your 8% limit. And all of that is also serviced within the district's target debt service millage, which we'll talk about in a second. Again, here, as I mentioned, 8% debt capacity and debt service millage levy. So your 8% capacity obviously changes over time based on assessed value changes. We pay off debt each year and obviously new debt is issued. So it's kind of a moving target that we work through. And as I mentioned, we also target 28 mils as your debt service millage levy. And we've done that historically over the past several years and plan to do that into the future. And our model projections show that you can finance all of these needs, including your 99 million of long-term debt, and stay within that debt service millage levy. So we don't see any need in the near future to increase that debt service millage levy unless some capital improvements came about that needed to be funded above and beyond what is already planned. And then the last slide that we
I stop you for a second.
Yep.
Let's go back to what you just said. Unless something, what would be an example of the need to raise the millage? What, when you say unless some unforeseen, what
Yeah,
exactly
so
is an
again,
unforeseen
I
problem?
think you have a very robust capital program that is funded majorly with your phase 5 sales tax program that's coming about. And those sales tax revenues are obviously coming in very strong, and we would hope that that would continue into the future. So that's going to be the bulk of your capital funding moving forward. What could come about, and I don't have a specific example of this, is there something above and beyond what the sales tax program might afford that becomes a critical capital need. That could require you to revisit additional long-term debt that might be needed in the future. Keep in mind, in our projections, we're also very conservative about how assessed values might grow over time, because we don't want a recession or something to cause a decline, and then you run into the issue of having to raise your debt service millage levy. So to the extent we continue to grow in terms of our assessed values, and we have a reassessment every 5 years, there's likely less pressure on that 28 mils, even if some unforeseen capital need came about. Does that address your question?
Yes, thank you.
Jay, could you also talk about when the district is anticipated to be debt-free, please?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So we have actually developed this model, and really, gosh, I don't know, I want to say for the last 5 or 10 years, have been showing all of the district's debt going away by 2032. So despite all of what seems like a significant amount of debt, it all gets paid back in a very short period of time. And absent any, again, additional long-term debt that goes out beyond that, the district would be completely debt-free by 2032. And, you know, at that point, you'd have like a lot of flexibility with kind of how you might fund your capital projects in the future.
That is, unless we issue $99 million in debt next year.
Actually, no, the $99 million that we're proposing to issue would fit within your 28 mil levy and still be paid off by that date.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Jay. And also just to flag, we pay off several hundred millions of dollars in debt a year. So when we go back and borrow,
45 million.
it creates additional capacity. But all of these, so just a little bit about the process. PFM, Carol, the executive team, Mr. Barori, myself, we meet and we cover revenue scenarios, expenditure assumptions. This is a conservative model, and the goal was for us to still maintain our complete debt payoff by 2032. So the scenarios that you see, the issuances that we are packaging for approval, that takes all of those assumptions into consideration, along with our debt payoff schedule.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the last slide that I'll just point out here, and just we title it Proactive Conservative Approach Equals Strong Credit Ratings, just to support what Ms. Williams just said. This is a very conservative debt structure in nature. We pay off about $45 million of principal in any given year, and all of the debt matures by 2032. Also give kudos to your staff. We have taken advantage of significantly lower interest rates over the last probably 10 years to refinance a lot of your existing debt as well, both on the general obligation side and the installment side. And you can see here in this table that over these financings, which are all refunding, similar to refinancing your mortgage, we've saved over $90 million of debt service cost on a net present value debt service basis. So when opportunities have presented themselves, we've taken advantage of those to lower the overall debt service, which also helps us keep within our millage levy. And then the last thing I'd like to point out is just anytime a district like Charleston or any other local government goes out and issues debt, you have to go out and acquire a credit rating to do so. That's an independent third party that comes in and talks about the financial characteristics and the ability to repay the debt that's issued. And Charleston Schools is currently rated AA2 by Moody's and AA+ by S&P, which are some of the highest school district credit ratings, you know, in the state of South Carolina and nationally, quite frankly. AAA is the highest rating you can get to, and I am not aware of any school districts, there might be very few that actually get to that AAA level nationally. And then, I just pulled an excerpt from the most recent Moody's credit report that was done late last year. And it just shows here, and I'll read it. The AA2 rating considers the district's strong financial position. In particular, fund balance is a big element of that. The strong wealth levels, average residential income, steady population and enrollment gains, and manageable leverage. So, and then they also note, obviously, given your coastal location, you're susceptible to climate risk and hurricane and other exposures related to that. But all in, given your financial picture, your overall debt load, you have very strong credit ratings, which is, a credit to you all and your staff on how you've managed the district over the last several years to get to this point. With that, I think that gives kind of at least a somewhat brief overview of sort of your existing debt and the series of financings we go through in any given year, and we'd be happy to address any questions you all might have.
Does the committee have any questions? One question I have on the amount that we're asking for. Obviously, we're basing this on estimates of future expenses and expenses that we do know that have to occur. But on the future expenses that we may be occurring, we borrow the money. Are we required to draw down all the money? Or let's say we suddenly became very efficient and didn't need all the money.
Are you talking about specifically with the bond anticipation?
Correct.
What this is really looking at what is going to be needed over the next 12 months as far as the Series A. And with the installment payments, it's what's needed for June 1st. And so
Right.
it's
That's a
it's
fixed
pretty
expense that you know,
focused.
right?
Yeah.
This Carol, if I might add, I think the known elements of it are everything except for the sales tax portion of it. And those are based off of cost curves that the district generates in terms of what might be needed over the next several months. And I don't know, I'm assuming Jeff is in the room, or Sean or somebody can maybe address that. So everything else is a known cost. And really the sales tax portion of it, which is only a $40 million of additional funding, is based on some cost curves that have been generated by district consultants.
Thank you. Hearing no further questions, I'd like to make a motion to approve the spring 2023 bond application anticipation notes in the amounts of not exceeding $70 million, Series 2023A, not exceeding $135 million, Series 2023B, and not exceeding $2 million, Table Series 2023C, to fund the following. The amount, number one, the amount of approximately $5,900,000 for the June 1st installment payment for the tax-exempt alternative financings based on our long-term debt structure and commitments, Series 2023A. Two, the amount of approximately $55 million to support the fixed cost of ownership capital program for FY 2024, Series 23A. Three, the amount of $1,200,000 to fund design and construction of Morningside Middle, AC Cochran Elementary, and Deer Park Middle, Series 2023A. Four, the amount of approximately $84,500,000 to retire the Series 2022C bond anticipation note for the Phase 5 sales tax program, Series 2023B. Five, the amount of approximately $40 million to provide cash flow funding for Phase 5 sales tax projects and Phase 5 capital maintenance, Series 2023B. And six, the amount of approximately $1,277,000 for the June 1st installment payment for the taxable alternative financing based on our long-term debt structure and commitments, taxable Series 2023C. That is the motion. Do I have A first on the motion?
A second?
Excellent. Can we have a vote on the motion? Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes, moves on to board for consideration. Next item up is item 5, fixed cost of ownership,
I'll turn it over to Mr. Barodi.
FY24 project list.
I'm sorry, Jeff. Can someone mute, please? We hear typing.
All right, so if the last presentation didn't excite you, this one will.
This is itemized.
This is a great presentation. So Mr. Duke, Mr. Hallis, this may look very familiar to you. You've been through previous fixed cost of ownership presentations. This is our FY24. This is our FY24 preview. It was included in the spring ban, which you just voted on. It'll be part of the district budget this summer. But getting us approval on this program now would allow our staff to plan and prepare and be ready to execute the funding when it comes in. Our bottom line up front slide really provides an overview of the program. Fixed cost of ownership is intended for replacement improvements of equipment and facilities across the district. Everything from activity buses to auditorium lights, baseball equipment to band instruments, software to school radios. This is the program that gets at it. We've got 18 program areas and management. Each one has a designated program manager. That program manager develops the requirements, puts together the budget, and presents it and puts it together for us to execute the following year. We've got slides behind this one that talk about each of those program areas. A couple of data points. One is the footprint of this district. We've gone up by nearly 2 million square foot over the last 10 years. That takes us to close to 10 million. That's equivalent to 5,000 homes. So for those of you that own houses, know that things wear out, especially if you have kids. You've got spouses that demand improvements, and this is what we have here in the school district. The funding line for this was flat through FY17, and we began to develop our requirements in more detail and systematically request additional funds. We've also added programs over the years that were not funded in the past. Our 24 request, our FY24 request is $55 million. That represents a $7.7% increase from last year. There are a number of reasons for that, which I'll talk about here shortly. The programs that are the heavy hitters for that increase include software, facility management, and security, as well as a general overall increase as it relates to supply costs and labor costs that are out there. We're seeing that really across the board. Software increases about 12%. Facility management is 20% increase, but there are two significant projects within that. Without those, it's about a 6% increase. And security represents a 15% increase. Again, we'll talk about those on subsequent slides. This is the presentation format for each of our programs. It's called a quad diagram. This is our largest program, facility maintenance. On all of the slides in the upper left, you'll see a purpose for the program. On the far right, you'll see a small table that shows last year's budget, the request for this year. If there is a variance, that's identified there. And if there are additional requirements, things that are below the line that we're not funding, we want you all to see what is in the queue that is not being funded. Again, I mentioned facility maintenance is our largest program. We're requesting $18 million this year. This pays for everything related to facility maintenance outside of all of the systems replacements. And you can see examples of those in the lower left-hand corner. We've got, as an example, I talk about ponds and fencing. We've got 71 detention ponds in this district. Vehicle replacement, we have 250 white vehicles across the district. We have to allocate funds to replace those. We've got contractual obligations, and that represents a significant increase in our amounts this year. We replace 64,000 filters a year. We clean 5,800 coils on our systems every year. We've got 39 cooling towers. These are just some physical numbers to show the magnitude of the program. On the far lower right, the variance requests, you can see the number of reasons why we're asking for additional funds. I will point out those two projects in the lower right, doors and locks. This was a presentation made to the last board. They recommended that we increase this line. This year, we're asking for $800,000 to provide more storefront locks on our classrooms. Storefront locks are self-locking doors. They don't rely on humans to lock the doors. We don't have to worry about human error. When the door's closed, it's locked. This is a preventive measure in the event of an active shooter. We do replace doors and locks within the sales tax program, not at a more rapid rate. And we also install these type doors on our new schools. So 3 ways we're attacking this problem. This would put $800,000 toward that. Phase 1 of the St. John's ball field, that's a $1.7 million add. Phase 2 would be next year. St. John's High School does not have a baseball and softball field, and we have an agreement with the city of Charleston to renovate 2 fields that they allow us to use whenever we need them, but also provides them use after hours. Next slide. Playgrounds. This is also part of facility management, but I like to keep the playgrounds separate. Recess was my favorite topic, and so I want to make sure these kids have good playgrounds. We want to make sure we've got funds dedicated to that. We're replacing 4 playgrounds with these funds. We also maintain and protect our turf. We maintain and protect our rolled surfaces, our rubberized surfaces at our playgrounds. The life cycle for playgrounds is about 12 to 15 years. We've got 136 playgrounds across the district. That's a $1.3 million request, no variance this year. The next slide is security and emergency management, $2.9 million request. This covers all of our systems replacements within our schools, as well as the radios and other handheld equipment that's used by our team, including the schools. The brunt of the funds go toward complete replacements of surveillance systems in our district. We're proposing to budget 9 of those this year. They're on about a 10-year cycle. Those systems range between $150,000 to $247,000 per system. So it's a big hitter. The variance request of $382,000 is for 2 reasons. One is to increase the rate in which we're installing our public safety radio enhancement systems, or BDAs, the bidirectional amplifiers. This gives our emergency responders better communications within our schools. We've identified the schools that need them. We replace them, or we install them when we have a new school coming online. The last board recommended that we include an increase in these system replacements from $300,000 to $600,000 in this program. And we also want to install a bus lot surveillance system at the Northwoods bus lot. Next slide is information technology. This is for our overall systems within the district and within our schools. File servers, network electronics, our PA systems, our uninterrupted power service systems. The brunt of the funding goes toward PAs this time. They're on about a 10-year cycle. We're going to replace 4 to 6 of those with the base request. The variance request of $500,000 is a cost that we identified that we were absorbing in other areas. This is to maintain our cameras and our electronic doors. We receive more than 2,000 work orders a month. Some of those might be as simple as relocating or moving a camera angle, but it may rise up to a $15,000 motorized gate replacement. And so we want to have the right amount of money to keep our security systems up and running. Again, more than 2,000 work orders a month for this program. The next one is classroom modernization. And this one is a summary of 3 programs: classroom technology, PC replacements, and sound systems. And I forgot to mention earlier, there are also Excel spreadsheets in the package. The Excel spreadsheets are the deeper dive into these slides. So each slide represents a group of Excel spreadsheets in which you can see more detailed elements of the programs. And again, this slide pulls together 3 separate spreadsheets: classroom technology, PCs, and sound systems. We replace our student devices on a 5-year basis, our teacher laptops on a 7-year basis. This money combines with our sales tax program. And so we look to both of those to keep our systems recapitalized. It is a very, very large program, 7.3 million. Next one is software. This is a very complex and a very detailed program. Although IT, I call IT the program manager, each of our division heads pulls together software requirements for their division. The heavy hitter is learning services, 8.75 million. I've got Ms. Simmons here if there are any specific questions about learning services requests, but a third of their requirements are compliance driven. A third are driven by mission critical items like scheduling, school choice, assessment tools. Those are absolutely essential to the district. And a third of those are curriculum enhancements. And I can say this year, Ms. Simmons really scrubbed this list hard and actually cut programs that weren't found to be proven to be helpful. And even though there is an increase in this line item, I believe that it's very much streamlined. And over the years, we've rolled this together. This in the past was, I'll call it the wild, wild west. And we've really rolled up software to be reviewed at the division level. And I think even though it represents a significant amount of money, it does receive a lot of scrutiny. In addition to learning services, IT has about a $1.9 million placeholder here for all of the network driven IT needs for monitoring and managing our systems. And you can see the variance request on the lower right. Each of our systems is going up to some extent. Learning services, IT, facilities, and human resource actually has a couple of adds, $1.4 million variance, roughly, our second largest program. Next up is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Although we completely put new equipment in our new schools over the years, our systems do need to be replaced. This is managed on a school by school basis. They submit their request. Sometimes it's simple as replacing the furniture in the lobby of the front office. Sometimes it's replacing entire classrooms. And we look at this on a case by case basis. Our schools that have utilized funding this year include Stall, Baptist Hill, Stiles Point, EB Ellington, and Moultrie. If the funding goes farther, we'll pull more projects from the below the line list. We do have a variance request here of 300,000, and that's to establish the district-wide asset inventory system. And we want to make sure we've got better accountability of our furniture in schools. The next slide is media centers. This is the full breadth of what goes on in our libraries, from digital to print collections, as well as the individual media specialist type items like the awards maker, poster makers, and the laminators. We also replace our library furniture with this account. We're going to replace furniture in 3 schools this year. Most of our library furniture has exceeded 20 years in its lifespan, and we're working really hard to get to the furniture that's driven by today's educational requirements. But it is a very strong program that's actually worked hand in hand with facilities. When we do replace media center furniture, we also do painting and carpeting. And so we do basically a complete makeover of our media centers when that's done. Fine arts, next slide. This is replacing band instruments and orchestra instruments. This is evenly distributed among all the programs that have schools, all the schools that have programs, $3,700 per band, $3,700 per orchestra across all the schools. They replace equipment, band instruments, orchestra instruments, and they also add when necessary. Athletics, this is for our high schools, including the gymnasiums. It's managed by program, football, lacrosse, baseball, et cetera. Our district athletic director compiles requests from the schools. Safety equipment is the #1 priority, like football helmets, lacrosse helmets. Those get funded first, and we make sure those are taken care of. But we feel very comfortable with this program with a small increase of $11,000 for escalating cost of equipment. Career technology, this one shows a very negative variance. Over the last 3 years, we had phased projects to fund a full rehab of culinary systems in West Ashley High School and Military Magnet. Those projects are now complete. We're back down to kind of normal funding for CTE, and you can see the base request, the projects that they pay for this year we're proposing they pay for on the far left, lower left. Planning and real estate, believe it or not, they manage our high school auditoriums. The high school auditoriums are used after hours, and we have managers in those 8 high schools that had auditoriums. We have to replace lighting and sound systems, and this keeps those auditoriums up and running. Transportation, even though the state provides us buses and we have contract service, we do have 56 activity buses that we manage across the district. And this budget we're proposed to replace 8 of those buses this year. The lifespan of these buses is anywhere between 11 and 15 years. We're also responsible for all the cameras and all of the radios and all the buses in the district. And this program continues to replace those systems. But we are asking for a variance because of the escalation in pricing. We also want to add 1 bus to Patterson's Academy. We support their busing needs as a special needs school. That's about a $95,000 add of the $390,000. Nutrition services, this program was just added 2 years ago to replace kitchen equipment. Our nutrition services department was taking that out of Hyde. What this has shown is we've really refreshed a number of our cafeterias. This budget allows us to buy across the district 50 items to replace, whether it be braising pans, ovens, steamers, serving lines, et cetera, has really made a big difference in the appearance and use of our cafeterias. And the last item, last but not least, is nursing services. This was a new program added 2 years ago. It shows a negative variance, so we're reducing money from this. Last year, we completely replaced our vital sign monitors, and we also bought a mobile vaccine clinic. This year, we're looking at replacing our AEDs, our thermometers, and vision screeners, as well as some other maintenance items across our clinics in all of our schools. So I know you've got a lot of questions related to all those slides. That was fast and furious, but we're standing by. I've got program managers on the line. If I can't answer it, I've got smarter people behind me.
So the floor is open for questions. Any questions from the committee? Come on, guys. The technology people have got to be asking, is there enough money in the budget to cover what you think we may need? Any of the members of the committee up to speed on that one?
Yeah, I'm good.
You're good?
I have no
Yeah.
questions, Keith.
I just want to make sure you're good with the amount that they're requesting. Because it does seem low, considering everything that's happening.
That's a real good point. We have a combined funding stream for information technology between this and the sales tax. And we've looked at the replacement needs of all of our building systems and our individual devices. And as of now, this fixed cost of ownership budget matched up with that sales tax leaves us flush for this year. That may change in the future based on funding. What was a huge help this past year, we had additional revenues from phase 4 that came in, and the Board of Trustees assigned or allocated about $14 million to IT. And if you look at that over the course of the last year and this year, that keeps us in real good shape.
So I just want to make sure that this is one of the issues that was covered with the technology committee in detail, so that this number, you feel very comfortable with this number.
Yeah, I mean, Tom would be the expert on it, but, we believe that the money that we put out there covers for all the biggest thing that we talk about is cybersecurity. So making sure, Tom has the infrastructure, the employees and, the software to make sure that, the networks that we have are safe and secure to the best of, we can do it.
Thanks, Steve. I hate to put you on the spot on that one.
It's all right. No, it's a technology top priority, and I'm pretty sure if Tom wanted another piece, they would put it in there. And what we've reviewed, and we go through all the analysis, on our quarterly meetings, and know, all the different types of tests are being done to the network and software that's back there to support that.
On the Johns Island Park renovation, so there's going to be a contract between us and the city of
So, right, this will fall in line similar to what we've done on Stony Field.
In Mount Pleasant?
Well, no, we've only have an agreement for, we have an agreement with all of our municipalities for joint use across the board. The only municipalities we have an agreement with to actually do a project jointly. We had one on Stony Field, the downtown football field for Burke, which we're just wrapping up now. We only have the press box remaining out there on that project. This would be the second one with the city of Charleston, in which they are actually looking at improving some aspects of their use of facilities out there, and as well as what we want to bring forward to it. We'll have an agreement both for the construction and the long-term maintenance of those fields.
And because of the cost, is that a contract that you would bring to the board to discuss?
So when we award that contract for execution, it would be over $250,000. That project would come for approval. This approval of this
Before it's
program-
awarded,
Pardon me?
before it's awarded.
Before it's awarded, correct. This gives us the authorization to develop the project.
Got it. And I noticed, I guess it's on page 11 of this wonderful spreadsheet, you had salaries in here.
Yes, sir. Good pickup. So in each of our programs, we align any of the program management resources to that program. So we individually review program manager's time. So a portion of my time is actually allocated toward fixed cost of ownership, as well as anybody who is either a program manager or supports the program managers. We look at how much time is allocated to fixed cost of ownership, and we align it to that respective program.
So this would be additional duties, or just it's something that's covered in their PD?
No,
And it's just a line item.
right, it's split funding essentially.
split,
So
got it.
instead of general fund absorbing the entire salary cost, because this funding source is available for that body of work, what Mr. Barori explained is the percentage of time that they allocate towards this program, we're able to fund it under this fund source.
And we do reassess that every year too, because there are opportunities to change that based on the identification of individuals that are either not going to be doing work in fixed cost of ownership or are going to be doing work in fixed cost of ownership. And Ms. Costello there, who's on the line, keeps us in line with that and make sure that we complete our paperwork every year to keep the books in line.
Miss Simmons, the software. I think the big question, and it's 13 million is a lot of money for software, but then and I would love for you to explain the breakdown of the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, because obviously critical mission, state required, there's some state required software that we have to spend for. And then there is the last third, which gets interesting. So you want to cover the first two, the easy ones?
For sure. And so we thought it easy. We thought it would be helpful to categorize our fixed cost of ownership program as a learning services unit. And if I may, before I get started, so this budget, this program is built out by the 8 departments under my office. That's assessment and evaluation, curriculum and instruction, Department of Exceptional Children, federal programs and ESSER programming, the Office of Translation and Interpretation Services, instructional programs, school choice, and student support services, all of which the good people who lead those departments are behind me. And so those departments feed this particular program. And I alluded to the first third or so of the budget being mandatory. We don't have an option. We must execute, we must deliver on these mandates from either the State Department or the federal level. And so that's easy enough, as you alluded to. The second bundle or group, if you will, really is operational. Those items that really are what I consider to be the engine behind how we operate as a learning services division, which encompasses all of academics, the core work of CCSD. And then finally, we have a core curriculum that we adopt for numeracy, literacy, science, social studies, but we have a program to supplement, to enhance, and to support teaching and learning at the building level And that's where that third category comes into place. And so I try to give a really easy to digest representation of what those titles are. And so we don't in isolation generate these titles every year, as Mr. Baroi alluded to. We vet these titles. They're based on input from our associate superintendents, from our building level leaders, and from the fine folks who are the experts in their respective areas. And so if there's a particular question about any item, we can unpack that for you. But in essence, all of these titles are in service to our core curriculum. They are supplementary in nature. They do not replace the core curriculum, but they are substantial in terms of producing results for our scholars.
And I just think in the future, when we list this, if we could just, by a simple M or a Fed state as to what's mandatory and what's not, because it just makes it so much easier. And then what's curriculum based, so that when people look at this, they realize that, some of this is operational need for software. I know it's broken down in some of the departments, but when you get to learning services, I think it's very important that the board understands that a lot of this is state and federally mandated. So I would just ask that you do that in the future. They're a little more easier
Very well.
to understand. Obviously, in looking at the curriculum, all of these curriculum enhancements are offered to all schools.
Right. So all things aren't created equal. So there are some that apply particularly and specifically to elementary. And then there are some titles that are unique to our middle grades and high school grades. And so that's why it may seem substantial and significant, because we want to tailor the support and the programming and the titles to the specific population.
Like special needs.
For example, there's a title in here that is unique to high schoolers because we found that certain programs or titles do not lend itself to the early childhood population. So we want it to be really tailored in what we deliver for our high school students. And special education programming, there's some that are applicable and important to early childhood, but there are some for the secondary population as well.
Excellent. Man, old age. It's on the tip of my tongue. Well, it can't be that important. Any further questions from the committee? I know Dr. Templeton, Ms. Templeton had the opportunity to meet with you, and she said that she was very impressed with a lot of the software. I trust her with her interpretation as a former teacher and heavily involved. Ms. Templeton or Dr. Templeton, you have anything you'd like to comment on?
No, I did meet with Ms. Simmons for an hour, and we went over the specifics of the requests and the curriculum, and I'm impressed that the assessment has been done and that they reevaluate every year, and they're looking at teacher usage as well as student effectiveness. So I was very impressed with the presentation and the thoroughness of the proposal.
Yeah, the last question that came to me. Thank you so much, Carol. The increase, what do you attest that to?
Sure, a few things. Natural inflation. You'll notice from that massive spreadsheet that you received that it showed what our fiscal 23 cost was. So it could have been for one particular title, for example, might have been 14,000. Well, in 1 year's time, the new cost could be 18,000. So we attribute natural inflation. Some of the titles were previously funded by the State Department, and they no longer are. So we're picking up some tabs, some costs that we didn't have previously in this budget as well.
Thank you so much. Any further questions from the committee? Hearing none. I would like to present to the committee a motion to approve the prioritized list of projects under the fixed cost of ownership FCO for the fiscal year 2024 project list as submitted. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a vote.
Aye.
Favor? The ayes have it. The motion passes and we move on. Thank you so much for the excellent presentation. Next on the agenda is item 6, the 2023-2028 capital program phase 5 long-term debt project list. Information purposes.
Ms. Shaw will be presenting that information.
Thank you, committee members. This informational item is recognizing that capital programs will borrow 1.18 million of the entire spring 2023 band. Of course, this is the same band that was just approved to move forward to the board for the month of February. And it's also listed as item number 3 within the item that you all just approved. The funding will be used for Morningside Middle to fully fund the design contract, as well as AC Cochran Annex project, and also Deer Park Cafeteria project in Fine Arts. That completes this item.
Do you have any questions from the committee? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 7, the monthly capital projects report.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Costello.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. I'd like to present the December 2022 capital projects report. Our revenue collections for the month were 3.4 million above our 2% projection in our financial model. The expenditures for the month were as follows. The 2010 through 2016 capital building program, $71. The 2017 through 2022 building program, $1.2 million. The 2023 through 2028 capital building program, $7 million. The 2023 through 2028 capital building program funded with long-term debt was $15,000. The fixed cost of ownership fiscal year 23 program will be nearing completion in May. And 2 items have been brought forward to you today for approval: the band 2023 financing and the fixed cost of ownership 24 project list. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Floor is open for any questions from the committee. Hearing none, thank you very much. We will move on to item number 8, the budget process updates. Ms.
Thank you,
Williams.
Mr. Grabowski. So what you have before you is a milestone calendar. This does not detail the entire budget process, but we selected key milestones and critical events. And where we are now in the budget process, we've been having cabinet strategic discussions, and we also have the FY24 budget kickoff letters distributed to principals as well as central office department. That letter comes from our budget department. It really kickstarts the planning process for FY24 at the school level and central office. We also have an upcoming board budget workshop on February 23rd. During that workshop, we'll set a foundation for the board on how our revenues and expenses, our revenues are generated, how our expenses are calculated, as well as some key budget assumptions. Once we have that budget workshop, we'll start to bring the initial FY24 revenue and expense projections forward with all of our assumptions. We have a few more strategic engagement discussions well in advance of the adoption of the anticipated budget, which we anticipate to be June of 2023. Any questions?
Floor is open for the committee. The committee have any questions? So the board workshops on the 23rd, do we have a time and location set
It's
for that?
anticipated to be February 27th.
February 27th.
Yes, in advance of the meeting, the board meeting.
That's the workshop.
Yes.
Hearing no further questions, we'll move on to item number 9, approval of projects over $250,000. An action item.
Thank you. This is an action item. So we have presented before you the list of projects that are greater than $250,000. It's a list of 9 items totaling about $18.2 million. What this list entails is largely capital program and facilities maintenance items. Those are big ticket items, which attribute to the amount. We have one IT item on here that's coming out of the fixed cost of ownership budget for the current fiscal year. Are there any questions related to the list, please?
Floor is open to the committee. Any questions? So we have one IT and the rest are just capital programs.
Yes, sir, and maintenance.
Hearing no questions, I would like to make a motion to approve the projects on the attached list or the projects over $250,000 as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Excellent. Can we have a vote?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes, moves on to the board for consideration.
Thank you. Can Mr. Kelly repeat his vote, please?
Oh,
We just didn't hear him.
we need a tally of the vote?
No, we just didn't hear Mr. Kelly's vote.
Oh, Mr. Kelly, Ed, you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
We need your vote.
Oh, I voted aye, I'm sorry.
Excellent. Thanks, Ed. The motion passes now unanimously. Excellent. We move on to item number 10, an ESSER update by Ms. Williams.
Thank you. So this is, again, the monthly snapshot of where we are with ESSER spending in the district. Just as a reminder, the report is broken out between ESSERs 1, 2, and 3. ESSER 1 has fully been expended. ESSER 2, we have $4.3 million remaining of the anticipated categorical spending. And ESSER 3, we have $93 million remaining to be spent. There's a note that the $93 million is earmarked for projects, programs, initiatives, et cetera, throughout the district. And we are spending as anticipated at this particular time. This is an information item. Are there any questions, please?
Are there any questions from the committee? I have a question.
Yes, sir.
On the ESSER 3 and then the 98 that is encumbered by some type of plan, where do I find this plan? Because when I go online, no document loads.
So there is a complete ESSER plan that was submitted for ESSER 3. We've submitted that for review. We've actually just amended it. So we can provide that.
When did it get submitted?
This was at the inception of ESSER 3, but what we do is we
The ESSER
amend
3,
it.
right?
Yes, for ESSER 3, we amend it as we go along as needed. And so we just finished up an amendment at the end of last month. And so we can provide that detail.
Curious about the process.
Mhm.
It seems like a lot of those expenses would be over $250,000.
Not necessarily. So some of the funds earmarked in the ESSER plan, it's for initiatives. So for instance, you'll have personnel cost as a part of teacher retention and recruitment efforts, et cetera, or learning loss prevention. It just depends. It can be people or services. Some of the funding is earmarked to be spent, which means we don't have a contract in place yet. And so once a contract is in place and we go through the procurement process, if the expenses are over $250,000, you would not see them on the $250,000 list. I'm sorry, you would see them on the $250,000 list if they were ESSER funded.
So this document that you filed it with the state for their review?
The amendment, yes.
Correct. And so we can get a copy, the board can get a copy of that?
Of the amendment, you can, yes.
Then I would ask that if you present the board a copy of that. It'd be nice.
Absolutely.
Also, it's my understanding, and I'm just trying to really see the May 13th, 2022 letter from Roberto Rodriguez, the Assistant Secretary, which I'm assuming of the U.S. Department of Education, who's overseeing all of this. It appears that under his letter that we have up until September 30th, 2024 to have all these funds actually delegated, and then it's 120 days from that point on that have to be spent. And I hear that that's maybe getting extended.
We have not, so checking with the state Department of Education to see if that additional 120-day extension applied to us. We were told as recent as last month, no. So the date for the funds to be obligated as it stands is September 30th, 2024 for ESSER 3.
So that not only do they have to be obligated, they have to be spent.
That is the understanding. Yes.
And that's from the state.
Yes, from our state contact.
Because it appears from this letter that we have the ability to go up and ask for an extension.
I do not disagree with you, sir. I have been knocking down that door for several months, trying to get an extension or to if the extension applies to our district. We've had no success at this particular time. So unless something changes, September 30th, 2024 is still our date.
Got it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any further questions from the committee? Hearing none, we will move on to item number 11, the Council of Great City Schools. And I asked Dr. Kennedy to do a presentation on this. And a lot of my intention really was to use this vendor as a potential example of an issue that had been raised by the committee in past meetings. And truly a lot of questions that were asked by the board as to our relationship with this vendor. My concern with a vendor, and I'm not saying that this group has, gotten to the point where there's a problem, but my concern with the vendor would be that they would, not so much on the procurement rules, because procurement rules are pretty set in stone, but maybe in the board policy, especially with this 250,000 cap, that we would have a vendor that would be providing services on multiple projects through a membership, and that amount would be higher than 250. The aggregate amount over a 12-month period could potentially be over $250,000. And I give you an example, greater cities, the membership fee is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is approximately $75,000 a year.
About half that, a little under half of that, for 3,000.
And then the board, well, I'd like your view on this and how this all came about and what we spent so far.
All right, so I can do that. Let me share my screen. I think.
While he's trying to pull that up his screen, Ms. Williams, are there type of processes in place that if we had a vendor under that type of scenario in which, let's say they did have a membership fee, and under the membership fee, they could provide services.
Mhm.
And if you took the aggregate amount over 12 to various departments, let's say they provided services to HR or they provide services to IT. At the end of the day, that reaches the 250 amount on that one vendor over the aggregate over 12 months.
So the $250,000 list is composed by contract item, by line. So it's not specifically by vendor. So for instance, using any vendor that we have in our system right now, they can have multiple contracts throughout the district and across fiscal years. If we look at our CM management firm, they have multiple projects. They have contracts. Their contracts extend over a number of years. That holds true for any vendor that we use across the district. Yes.
So I just sent an Excel file to you. Maggie, if you could open that up, or Trina, please. And then share the screen.
I think Maggie's going to
And
share.
then Trina, I'm going to send you also some. You have it, Maggie?
Maggie's doing it.
Can you, are you able to increase the size on those columns? While she's doing that, I went back, had data pulled for the last 3 fiscal years, 20, 21, and 22. This is for the Council of Great City Schools. So at the top here, it shows amounts that were paid by check, and at the bottom, amounts paid by P cards to the Council of Great City Schools. So go back to the top, Maggie, please. So in 20, at the bottom of the first section there, April 30, 2020, that 40,383 was the annual membership that was paid to the council. A year later, we paid $900 rather in membership. And then in 2022, last May, we paid $43,600 in memberships. So that's the annual amount roughly that we pay each year for membership. And then the other 2 items there, the $3,500, we had a board member from the prior board that was a part of a cohort of board members from across the country that were participating in a particular program. And then the $20,000 amount was an additional amount that we paid for the consulting services around the student outcome governance framework. So over the last 3 years, you can see we paid $148,400 to the council by check. And then at the bottom, that section at the bottom, those payments were by purchase card, a P card, and column E shows we had a total of during that same time period, 2020 through 2022, of almost $2,100. And those are for conference registrations for those folks that you see to the right for the various conferences that the Council of Great City Schools puts on each year. Now, as a comparison in terms of membership fees, I also, not on the spreadsheet, but I had someone pull right before I came into this meeting. So we pay, for example, there's the South Carolina School Board Association. So, okay, we pay $47,400 per year for membership. And then for the South Carolina Association of School Administrators, so it'd be people who are or people like me, everybody in this room, as an example, a member of that association, and that annual amount is $36,200, the most recent. And then a third example is to the Regional Chamber of Commerce. The district is a member of that body, and we pay $50,000 per year for that membership. So in any one given year, I could not conceive of a situation where with the Council of Great City Schools or these other three entities that I show as reference points where we would exceed, where we would come in with close to $250,000 in a given year.
And I think a lot of the questions comes up on this contract that the school district entered into with the Council of Greater City Schools to assist in the district governance. And it's my understanding that this contract was, I guess, terminated on December 31st, 2022.
I think it expired.
Expired, right? Not terminated, expired 2022. I'm just curious, why was it signed on 11/9/2022?
Oh, I didn't go back and research that. The question wasn't posed to me prior to this meeting, but there was some challenge, some hiccup in terms of the timing. So the initial, the contract was initially contemplated. I think it was the summer of 2021. And the board.
Yeah, July 1st, 2021 is when they signed it.
Yeah, and so with the intent that the school board, the then school board would follow through with that contract and do the work. The school board didn't follow through until June of 2022, a year later. And so I think the assumption was that we had the contract in place, and when we recognized that we didn't, we just formalized it.
So that's why all the dates don't match
That's
up.
right.
So basically, they signed the contract in July, and then a year later is when they actually started providing the services, which was the drawdowns.
Well, it was a year later before the board decided to accept the service.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
But right now, as with the board, we just have, with the district, we just have a membership. And what does the membership provide?
So, hold on one second. I'm going to, sorry, I don't have access to my screen share, but I will show you here shortly, since I get this resolved. So, and the contract that you have, that you mentioned, the 20,000 it's not part of the normal membership. So Maggie, I'm going to send you another file, another email rather. There are three URLs. If you can open up one at a time in the order in which I sent, which they're listed. Thank you, and then display them.
Yeah, I would have expected the 20,000 to have been part of this contract, fulfilling the final
Sorry, say
requirement.
again?
I would have, when I saw the 20,000, I would have expected it to be part of this contract as per the terms of the contract.
Yeah, so much of the services that are provided through the council are done through volunteers. So for instance, there's something that's called, we call strategic support teams. So if a chief financial officer in a member district would like to have some part of the financial operation reviewed by experts, the council will reach out to other CFOs across the country, 5 or 6, 7 or 8, and ask them to would they be willing to serve on a review team. The team that the district that's being reviewed will be sent a list of questions and asking for documentation. That information will be sent to each of the members each of the CFOs who agreed to participate. And then at some point, that group will travel to that district and they will do an actual review and then issue a report. And so it does two things. One, it gives the district that's being reviewed an opportunity to make sure that they have best practices in place. And then the other part of that, the CFOs and other finance people, and it does not only apply to finance. I'm giving that as an example. Operations do the same thing as an example. HR. It gives the people that are actually performing the reviews an opportunity to learn themselves because they see what other CFOs, other operations folks, HR people across the country are doing, and they're able to adopt best practices.
finance is using them, HR is using them, or their databases basically, and their assistants.
So we do. We also use them for key performance indicators. And so the council actually developed this wonderful database where it takes information from all the member districts and it looks at best practice KPIs or key performance indicators. And it ranks the districts based on their performance. It gives strategies, recommended solutions, et cetera. And just to piggyback, I've participated in one of the peer reviews that Mr. Kennedy just referenced. It also is a great resource for the school district to receive a peer review and to be a part of a peer review for best practices, for implementation, for ideas, and also just to collaborate with other districts who may be experiencing the same operational or demographical circumstances that your district is. And so it's actually a very great process.
Ms. Williams mentioned the KPI. So a report is issued by the council every year. The latest one is shown on the screen here. It's called Management for Results in America's Great City Schools. Over a number of years, this was developed, and so each year the council, they have somebody on staff will send out a detailed data request, and then each district inserts this data into the system, and then there's some analyst that analyze all this into what Sean says. So let me show you as an example. So this is the latest one from last year. Can you scroll down, Maggie, to, so if you take a look here, if you can see the different KPIs are key metrics, key performance indicators are in different categories, starting with finance. So you see accounts payable, cash management, compensation. Keep scrolling. Fiscal management, grants management, risk management, procurement, food service. This is in operations now, maintenance and operations, safety and security, transportation. So in a number of areas, HR. So keep scrolling. Let me give an example. So go down to keep scrolling. So this is how they read the tables. Go down. Keep going. Accounts payable. So let's go to this next one here. So yeah. So accounts payable cost per invoice. How much does it cost to process that invoice in a district? And so the top line here. So on the right hand side, it lists all of the member districts who have participated. As by code here, it says district code. On the left hand side, it shows. Go down below the graph. So it shows what we call metric definition, how the metric is calculated. So it shows how it's calculated, and then it talks about the importance of the measure, and then talks about the factors that might make the measure indicate a problem, or factors that may show that things are being done well. So those factors that influence that measure, and then at the next section, it says it highlights the districts in the best quartile. Now, the reason why I picked this particular one, because you see Charleston County School District, this particular metric, is listed in the best quartile. But let's go back up to the graph. And what is it showing? It shows the red line here shows that, so the yellow line is the median. This of all the districts that participated, all the data, this is the median. So the red line shows the districts that are significantly above that median. And then the green line shows that the districts that are doing much better than the average or the median. And so this report is issued every single year, and districts across the country can use this to benchmark themselves against each other. And then also the importance of highlighting the districts that are doing well in a particular metric is that if another district is not doing well, they want to understand what are some of the processes factors that the districts that are doing well, then they can pick up the phone or send the email and get that. And so on the district, on the Council of Great City Schools website, this is right off the website, and it lists these reports going back well until I think about 2010, 2009 timeframe when this whole process was created. And then the other thing here is the professional development within the with the members who are in the district. So when this was created, I was one of the volunteers across the country who actually created this, and I was able to bring people together through project management, so that we jointly were able to increase our knowledge for our respective school districts as we develop this process. Another thing that the council does is provide individualized professional development. So there's for example, since I was a finance person, I talk finance, most recently a finance person, but there's a training program for district finance staff who have potential, have been identified as having potential to become CFOs. And so that's a year-long training program. I was going to put
and I'm glad you brought that up, because that kind of segues into what I was trying to discuss. So here's a membership, and obviously the databases are important and they're part of the membership. But then there's also this other services that they actually charge for. An example, the South Carolina School Board Association. If I wanted to use them for a superintendent search, they have a flat fee and I have to pay for it. It's a service. It's not part of my membership, but my membership is to get a discounted service through that organization. I'm assuming, and a bad place to do it, but the greater city is exactly the same thing.
So yes, and in all my years, and I've personally been associated with the Council of Great City Schools since I've been in K-12 back in 2004. In all my years, in all the districts I've worked in, I have never seen an additional service that was paid for, with the exception of the student outcome governance. And I would speculate that's because they have to rely on former school board members from across the country, not
more customized.
That's right.
Got it.
That's right. That's right.
Just getting you ready for the questions. They're going to be coming. Because I think it's a clear understanding of what they are, what service they're providing. And I think it's important that everybody understands it's not just what they did for the board, which was a separate service. And that's why there was a separate cost, a separate contract, but that other departments rely on their database and they find their database useful. So I just think we need to be prepared for that.
All right. So let's, unless you have any other questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? Further questions from the committee?
Or the only question I have is, the data that's in there from the greater schools is only as good as how many school districts are reporting and putting the data in there. Do we know what percentage of school districts in the U.S. actually use and provide their information?
Well, so this the membership is restricted, and so we have I think currently there's about 75 school districts across the country that are members, and the membership tend to be the larger school districts in each respective state. So it's not open to all 13,000 school districts in the country.
So and that could skews that data a little bit because you're only looking at possibly the best school districts versus some of the other school districts that may be in there, because I guess none of this type of data is available, is not public information. So none of this type of information is reported to South Carolina Department of Education or the Federal Department of Education that could easily be pulled to see some of this information, correct?
Well, one of the reasons that this project was taken on was because there was not data that was readily available for comparison.
All right.
Oh yeah, this is available. Yeah, well, this particular data that I showed you is available publicly, but you're talking about for all the 13,000 school districts across the country. That's a database that you can get to know. But this data certainly is. I pulled out what I just showed you is on the public website.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, I thought the size of our school district puts us at what percentile nationally? Aren't we up there? As
Well-
one of the larger school districts?
So you have, I would categorize school districts in terms of size in different buckets, tiers. So you have humongous districts like New York City,
And Orange, yeah, Orlando.
LA with 700 or 600,000 now, Chicago with almost the same. So Miami with the same amount. So those are huge districts. And then you have another tier that runs down about 150,000 to 250,000, 250,000. And then we would be at the next tier between 40 to 100,000. And so we fall in there. But the majority of the school districts across the country are much smaller than that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
And so like if you would do a comparison for Charleston County School District, we are comparable in size to Boston, Seattle, probably Oklahoma City, some of those school districts. But if you were in a sports town, it'd be like Cleveland, Cleveland, like a mid-sized market, a mid-sized market versus New York City, which is, it's a big size market.
And out of those 75 members, how many, and this is just rough estimate, are about the same size as us? They'd be comparable to us.
I would say
Because obviously our issues versus New York are two different, apples and oranges.
Yeah, I would say it'd be a bell curve. You'll have a curve. You'll have the New York, LA,
Got it.
Chicago, and then you have some smaller ones like Pittsburgh, about 25,000 or so. And then in the middle, we would be right in that curve. What?
I have a couple of questions. It sounds like our membership in this organization is expiring. And so I'm just wondering, I know we got some help with the student outcomes, and just wondering, from staff, and you don't have to report it now, but how have staff members felt they benefited from association with this particular group? Are there any other South Carolina school districts that are involved with this group? And he said something about professional development. So what kind of professional development does the organization provide? Is it all virtual, or is there, a conference? I know we're in the process of thinking about hiring a new superintendent. So what would their process look like? What do they do? How do they do it? What criteria do they use for or ask us to provide for selecting the superintendent? So just a lot of questions, about continued involvement, because it has been suggested that for our student outcomes, our school board members need more training. And so it'd be interesting to know, what would that training be? How long would it be? What would it cover? What would we learn? That kind of thing.
Okay, we can explore that. And I will say though that districts get out of the membership what districts ask for.
That's
so
true.
There's a lot of services
Absolutely.
out there, and we don't. Most of it is free of charge.
And I think that a lot of to Dr. Temple's questions can be addressed if we just look at the membership and see exactly what services are provided.
Yeah, if you go
Like
to-
the SEC, South Carolina School Board Association is pretty clear what services they provide.
So I can pull that off the website. So if you go to the cgcs.org, cgcs.org.
I think Carol's one question is kind of relevant though, as to are there any other South Carolina schools that are, other districts that are members?
So Charleston is the only member district in
Okay.
in the state, and again, it's by invitation. So we're the only district in the state. Some people that are members of the district, some districts have gotten great benefit from it, and some don't use it as much as others. Personally, I wouldn't be where I am now had I not taken advantage of the services of the Council Grace City Schools since I came into K-12 a little bit late in my career.
Carol, you okay with that, of us just getting a hold of the membership and getting it produced to the board? Because I think that will answer a lot of the questions that you just asked.
Yeah, if you can, do that, and then just any, anecdotal, if any of our people have participated in their training, how did it benefit them? So that if we're not taking full advantage of everything they have to offer, then maybe we need to know what this group can offer. So our staff can reach out for the support that this group is trying to provide.
Well, so I will say that staff, the local staff does take advantage of the council's offerings. Now, over time, maybe the school board has not taken full advantage, but certainly staff has. And then we can give some examples of that.
So I think it would be helpful because if we as school board members can access services or information, then that would be very helpful.
And I just bring, this is just like South Carolina School Board Association.
I'm sorry.
It's like the South Carolina
Yeah.
School Board Association. They provide services
That's
for
right.
the board. Anyway, if we have no further questions from the committee, I'd like to move on to item number 12 for the wonderful monthly financial update.
Thank you.
Nothing
Mr.
but good
President.
news,
Thank you.
please.
So you are correct, sir. Our financial outlook looks pretty good for fiscal year 23. So at the last Audit and Finance Committee meeting, I discussed with you all that the financial report would change from a comparison of revenues and expenditures at a point in time this year to the point in time last year, the same point in time last year, to actually projecting out where we're going to end the fiscal year 23 budget, where we're projecting to end. So as of right now, what we budgeted in FY23, we approved $640 million, $640.7 million in anticipated revenues. We're expecting to end the year with $645.8 million in revenue. This is about a $5 million increase, and it's largely attributed to local revenues coming in about $5 million higher based off of the September 2022 tax assessment that we worked with the county treasurer's office to verify and project out. On the expenditure side, we budgeted in FY23 $659.5 million in expenses. We're anticipating to come in at $653 million with a decrease in anticipated expenditures by $6.4 million. This is largely due to largely due to salaries and benefit savings for unfilled positions, as well as some of the smaller unanticipated expenditures that we anticipated when we developed the FY23 budget. So overall, we expected when we budgeted for 23 to use $18.7 million of fund balance. We are now expecting to only use $7.3 million of fund balance due to the increase in revenue and the decrease in anticipated expenditures. Now, as we conduct the rest of the school year from this point in time, from December essentially through June, this picture will update. The assumptions will change as real data, real numbers come in. We firm up our revenues, we firm up additional expenses, but we're projecting right now to end the year on a positive note other than what we had initially planned. Are there any questions, please?
Floor is open to the committee. Any questions, please? It looks excellent. Hearing none, I think we need to move into executive session to handle personal matters. And how do we do that with everybody on Zoom?
So we'll take care of it.
So we are adjourned, or we're moving into stay here.
Just want to confirm which item. You don't have to vote on it.
No,
Just
just
confirm which
confirm.
item to vote on.
Yeah. Get my list out.
You looking for your agenda?
Yeah, unfortunately, my agenda, let me use your back page of your agenda. Okay. We are back in session. I'd like to make a motion that the following items are presented to the board for action. That would be spring 2023 bond anticipation notes, the bands, the fixed cost of ownership FY24 project list, and approvals of projects over $250,000. Do I have a second?
So there are some additional items, sir, if
Is
I
there,
may.
which item did I miss?
Item 4 is the spring band, 5 fixed cost of ownership. Item 6, the capital projects, the capital program phase 5. Item 7, the monthly capital projects report.
Those are information.
They are.
Oh,
but
you
we-
want me to,
we pushed
you wanted
them
me to put
forward.
them all on one motion?
Not all, just,
Yeah, because I was just putting the action items under this motion.
so we don't need a motion. It's just,
No.
So we don't need a motion. We just identify, make sure that we're on the same page.
Right,
Let's
okay,
go
right,
into the,
right.
up to the board.
That's right.
Yes, sir. So items 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, and 12.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And then our next meeting will be
March 7th.
March 7th.
March 7th, yes.
March 7th. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Can I have a second?